Hello ladies, I hope you're doing well, and I hope that what I bring to you today will keep you busy and not interfere with your work. You know, one of the things I love about Homemakers Radio is that it's something you can listen to and it doesn't take up your time because you're doing something while you listen. And years ago when we used to have the ladies Bible classes and ladies day and ladies seminar, it took so much time to prepare. If you were the teacher, it took an enormous amount of time to prepare for it, and then for the people that were inviting you, they had to prepare their homes or someplace, the accommodation, and then they had to make sure they got the invitations out, and it was an enormous project. Sometimes they were planned months ahead of time. But this way, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to travel, and you don't have to go to a lot of trouble or expense, and you can have something to listen to as you go. And I'm sure that that was always available, but this is so convenient, and I'm really liking it. So the first thing that we do on Homemakers Radio, and by the way, I'm Mrs. Sherman. I'm a veteran preacher's wife and veteran homeschooler, and I have a lot of things to share to you, even if you are not the same as I am. There are probably some things that you might find interesting that might help you to get motivated in your homemaking. It's for people who are home, who need to listen to something. I know I have my favorites, and I like to listen to certain things as I work, and so it isn't for anybody of any particular age. It's just for ladies who are at home, no matter what your age are. And I particularly want to appeal to the young because too many times I think, and I can remember as a very young person, that I would tend to look towards the people my age for things like how to keep house, how to raise children, that sort of thing, and it probably wasn't always very wise. What worked with their homes and their children, their husbands, didn't always work with everybody else, and I think we tend to too much go to people our age. So I think that the ages were designed by God to interact with one another, so the elderly and the young could all benefit from one another in some way. And I know in particular, as I grow older, I just enjoy the energy of youth and their ideas and the way that they do things, and often try to find videos where young people are doing things. So today I would like to say, if you would like to leave a comment, please go to my blog to do that. That's where I'm parking these videos, and I will put the link there for you. And so today, the first thing we do on these radio programs is, and sometimes we do have callers, and I have done that in the past, but it's a little bit more complicated, so I've left it for this for now. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you can get something done, and there is nothing to watch. But I will show you my teacup before you go. Kind of goes with my dress. I left my apron on today because I just wanted you to see how I dress at home. And this is that Queen Anne's lace print that I made some time ago from a piece of fabric from Hobby Lobby by Brothers Sister Designs. Very nice. Anyway, here's the teacup, and from what I can say about the handle and the shape and everything, this is probably from the 1970s or 80s. It's not as antique, and the way that I can tell is that the handles are a little bit bigger, and it's by Royal Stafford, which I guess is still being produced, and it's got kind of a scallop around it, kind of like it. So the first thing that we do when we start listening to Homemakers Radio is to get dressed and be prepared. That's just getting ready as though you were going to have a house showing. Let's suppose that your house is for sale. Now don't panic, I'm not saying it is, or that you should even think about it, but it's a way to get motivated is to think, what was it like when I went to view a house that was for sale? Now one thing you have to know about real estate is that you don't lose the sale, and there are certain things that will make you lose the sale. So what you do is you create your house and your homemaking as though you didn't want to lose the sale. You didn't want to bring anything negative to the picture, to the table, to the deal that you're going to make for selling your house. So you wouldn't leave anything out or anything that's not quite polished. You know, for instance, the faucets on the sink in the kitchen, you would wipe them down, not leave anything on them, and you don't leave stains, water stains anywhere in the sinks. And so you also want to make it to where the things that you don't want your customer to see are not in view. We all know we have those rooms and those drawers and those closets, but in case someone opens a closet, we really need to be prepared. And so getting dressed is the same thing. It's like being prepared, and you're going to greet people at the door. And to make, in these times when many people are home right now, it's very important that you treat your family, those that are in that house, as the most important people in the whole world. They're better. Too often, I think, for some reason, people got the idea that you could treat your family bad, but if company came, you put on your best clothes and your best manners. But it should be the beginning of treating other people well should be treating yourself and your family the best. So get dressed up for them. They're the ones that are going to tour the house. They might not know they're on a tour, but make it so that it is like they are touring it. And one thing you can do is be creative in it. And I like to put surprises in little corners of my of little rooms and places that you wouldn't expect. And I like to be creative. And one of the reasons that I began to get interested in home decor, home interior decor, is because I knew that in the circumstances that I always lived in, especially being a preacher's wife, we would never have the ability or the finances to remodel, or sometimes even to paint. Paint is pretty expensive sometimes. So I thought if I could learn to decorate, I could place things strategically around the house that would direct the eye to that, and not so much to the peeling wallpaper or to the flaws in the house. And so that is one of the reasons. The other reason was, and you might find this interesting too, is that it takes the drudgery out of the work. If you think when you get up in the morning, you're headed for another day that was almost the same as the day before, and you're going to have to load the dishwasher, you're going to have to unload it, you're going to have to sweep the floors, take care of the trash, do the laundry, and you've got to make it interesting. And one of the first things you can do to make it interesting is change your appearance. Be bright, be happy with what you wear, dress up. Dress up as though something important is going to happen, and you'll always be prepared. All I have to do today is just remove my apron if I'm needed for something else, or if for some reason someone comes in and unexpectedly, then I'm prepared. Another thing that you can do, that I learned this from people years ago, ladies, used to bake things and freeze them so that they could just take them out quickly and then heat them in the toaster oven, muffins, anything like that, and serve them if someone dropped in on them. And so it wasn't any kind of stress for them. So to dress up and also to keep your home dressed up is a very motivating thing, and it's a signal that you're going to be doing something worthwhile and that you are something worthwhile. So dress yourself up, dress your home up. This is important. You're not just washing those dishes and cleaning the sink. You're leaving it better than when you first saw it that day. And so be prepared as though you're going to have a house tour. That is a very interesting thing. Have you ever done that? Have a house tour? It's a lot of hard work. It's very stressful too. But if you'll maintain what you've cleaned and keep your house up every day, then you actually can have a house tour, and we'll just have your family go through it if you can't have anyone else. Now, being in the position I'm in as a preacher's wife, it's easy to get a crowd to come over here for a special tour if I'm doing something like a holiday tour or spring or something like that. But I have to restrain myself from doing too much of it, because it can really take up a lot of time. But you can do it at home as part of your homemaking. When you clean up that bathroom or that bedroom, instead of thinking, I've got to get this cleaned up, think, I'm getting this cleaned up because I want to show it. Now, I know that there's some objection to showing everything and showing off what you wear. But you know, we have a God in heaven who sees us too. And the least we can do for the beauty that surrounds us, for what He provides for us, for the life He's given us, is to dress up and to dress up our homes. And I have so much to talk to you about this because, you know, I have over the years read books, old fiction books back in the olden days, about people who ended up for some reason on an assignment or a career that landed them in a very remote place where they were not really appreciated, but were there temporarily, and what the wife did to make her home a home. And it's so interesting to see. It's easier for people, I think, who know that they're in an isolated situation or a hard situation. They know they're only there temporarily. That's easy because they know, well, it won't be long, and so this is what I'll use the time for. But for people who have to stay and they don't see an end to it, and that can be hard too. They will think they're stuck in a place forever, and it will cause them to lose their motivation. But we can't do that. We want to make the best use of our time, of ourselves, and of our homes as we possibly can. So besides getting dressed, let's think about dressing up your home, not just cleaning it, but taking it, stretching yourself further, getting a little further. You know, one of the things I learned from taking an exercise class online is that each time, at first I couldn't keep up, and it was actually exercises for over 50-year-olds, and I couldn't even keep up with that. This woman was so energetic, but she said, just do what you can, and to every 10 movements she made, I made 3. Well, finally I got to where I could keep up because she said, just stretch yourself a little more each day. And you know, it's the same with homemaking too. You can stretch yourself a little bit more. You don't need to do what just needs to be done in order to get by. That's just so mediocre, isn't it? Just getting by. If you'll do your excellent best and stretch yourself a little bit, then eventually, I think, for myself, I found that I could keep up. Another thing I learned from taking the online exercise classes was these exercise instructors, and I used various ones because I wanted to see which ones I liked best, which ones I enjoyed the most, was that they would have challenges, like a 3-day challenge or a 7-day challenge or a 14-day challenge, and they would for 3 days they'd have 3 different sets of exercises you could do. See if you could do them for 3 days in a row. And I thought to myself how that could be applied to homemaking, housekeeping, cleaning, because we don't have, see, here's the big difference. You have to, between this and working in a group. You don't work in a group in a home unless you have a family around you, and even they are very individual, have their own individual jobs. But you have to have your own challenges, and I thought, why not make a 3-day challenge for myself? For 3 days, let's see if I get the basics done all the time and not get behind. For 3 days, let's see if I can keep the kitchen clean, the laundry caught up, the floors swept, or and add one more every day, maybe keep my correspondence up. Just let's see if I can do it for 3 days. And then give myself a 7-day challenge, and maybe give myself a 14-day challenge. And this is what I learned from the exercise programs that I've been following. Is they'll have a certain amount of days and a challenge to see if you can do them all. And I think that we could do it if we had the instructions along with it, but you have to be self-motivated at home because there isn't a class to go to, and unless you find something online. I know that there are some you can find which will give you challenges to see if you can keep up, but you could probably just write your own and write them down in your book and see if you can do them for 3 days, and it's kind of exciting to put that little check mark after you have done it. So being dressed is a signal that to your thinking. It's a signal to your mind that what you're doing is worthwhile. And then taking care of your house and getting it dressed up is a signal also to yourself that this is really an important place, and I think it is so important. We want to keep it sanitary, we want to keep it beautiful too, and we want to use our creativity when doing it. So I gave myself several 3-day challenges, and some of them were specific and some of them were more philosophical. Like, for 3 days I'd like to be tidy, efficient, and caught up. But it works better if you'll mention in what. In what do you want to be tidy and what do you want to be caught up? For 3 days I would like to be dressed up and have my hair done, or not to neglect these things. And for 3 days I'd like to stretch myself further in each thing that I attempt. And housekeeping is important because this is where you'll work. And like I said, we have to be self-employed and you have to be self-motivated. It takes a while to do that, especially if you grew up going to institutions, going to schools where your work was laid out for you by someone else, or if you have worked outside the home and all this was planned for you for years ahead. This is one of the problems with institutionalism, that the home becomes neglected because there's no one there to boss you. And I always remember, in the Proverbs where God talks about the ant or the coney or some other animal that without anybody telling it what to do, it knows instinctively how to get ready for the winter, or how to store things, and how to make a home. And so we need to bring our natural instincts back. There are instincts for it. And one of the best ways to get an instinct for something is when you have a child, because that child's needs will regulate you for a long time. His needs in feeding and bathing and changing and comforting and different things that child needs is going to regulate you for a while. And you'll find that life eventually will settle down into the things that need to be done the most urgent. And you can tell, it's time for a meal. Now it's time to clean up the meal. And this is how you become self-regulated, by observing what is needed the most. So as you go and you're cleaning your house, think about where you are going from it and how you're going to add a creative touch afterwards. I remember Emily Barnes' book, The Spirit of Loveliness. I don't know if you can still get that book, but she was a prolific writer, and she did a lot of seminars in the 1980s. There were VHS tapes that you could watch of her seminars, and she talked about homemaking. She talked about making the home beautiful, and her books had beautiful illustrations in them, and sometimes were illustrated by Susan Rios, who is an artist in California. As a matter of fact, I have taken some of her art classes on Zoom, and so she talked about homemaking in such a beautiful way. It took the dread and drudgery away. And speaking of dread, if there's a place in your house that you just feel so uncomfortable and you dread going into, the best way to overcome it is to clean it and become familiar with it. Become familiar with the corners, with the walls, with the floor, with everything, so that you know what it is. I knew a lady once that I stayed with for a while when I was younger, and she had the peculiar habit of she wouldn't sit down and visit for very long before she would get up. And she would get up and she'd open a closet door. She'd just look at it up and down. And then she'd kind of move something or remove something. Or she'd open a bookshelf door or a cabinet door or a kitchen door, and she'd look in it and she'd just move something, because she liked to keep up with things, and that's how she kept busy. And it was bred into her from the time she was a child. Her mother was very proficient in this, and I just thought that was so interesting. I never quite acquired the habit myself, but I always admired it, to get up, to look around. And the best thing to do is to get your house cleaned and in order, and then maintain it. That's easier to go check on everything after it's already clean. Just get up and go back and look again, and just clean as you go and keep it going. So to be tidy and efficient, and to stretch yourself further each time, to, instead of overlooking a mess or a problem, tackle it. I'm the worst procrastinator. I can walk past a mess and think, that's going to take time and energy. I don't have time. I don't want to be exhausted before I go to bed. I've got other things that need to be done. I'll take that little extra minute, and I'm starting to probably due to exercise classes. I'm starting to think that not going to take that long and it's going to look so much better. You feed yourself back real positive things, and you can be happy and positive at home because it's a nice place to live, and you're the one that's going to make it a nice place to live. So I got to thinking while I was formulating in my mind what I would say, and I don't have anything written down here. I don't have any notes today. I'm just talking. It's how important it is to have something to show for your knowledge. And while we may say it's important to be creative and to be a good housekeeper, I think it's really important to show that we mean it, and to show by the way we act what we know, by the way that we live and by the way that we act. And certainly having a home that we can share someday. I know some people are a little bit shy about sharing their home, and I can understand that too. I don't think it's good to let people get too familiar with us so that they start thinking that it's their house, but it's motivating to know that you have to show it sometimes, or somebody's going to see it, even if it's your own children. It's an influence on your children too. It's an influence, and they'll come in and think, oh, our mother has changed something, and it's important. I think that they respond to that. Now, I was reading some interesting stories over the years about women whose husband had been transferred to some out-of-the-way place, whether it was in the middle of a desert or in the middle of a cold forest, a snowbound place, or some island in the Pacific, and how there was a collection of stories years ago that you could read maybe in a magazine where they submit a story of what they did while they were there. So I just wanted to tell you one little story that I know, the person I knew personally, and her husband was transferred to work at a sawmill out here in Oregon. And by the way, we have beautiful weather here. Everything is just beautiful and green, and we had all these dried leaves falling off of the trees a while back. Remember I told you this, everything went red, the sky was red, the atmosphere was completely red, you couldn't see very far in front of you, it was all red. And then we had a lot of ash and terrible smelling smoke that didn't smell like firewood to me. And the leaves all fell and everything turned awful and brown. And now we had a huge amount of rain and everything turned green again. I mean, we call it a relief because the leaves turned green again. How's that possible? And the weather is absolutely beautiful. It's just so soft. The air is so soft. It smells so sweet. So we're really grateful for that. But this lady, her husband had been contracted to go to a sawmill way out at the edge of a forest somewhere. And he was going to be gone quite a bit of time. I'm not sure what kind of work he was in, but I suspect it was in managing or monitoring something or recording something. So he was going to be gone quite a while, several months, and their children were grown, and so what they did is they got themselves a little caravan, trailer, motorhome, and they went and lived in that while he did his work. And so there was no town, there was no place to buy anything. She took with her, she made some plans of what she was going to do. So she decided she wanted to make blankets and quilt. She took with her some instructions, some books, and she took her fabric with her, and she hand stitched. She sat at that little table while he was gone. You know, these little motorhomes and caravans only have just a small table, but she would stitch these little blocks for her beautiful quilts. I always wanted one, but she didn't will me one when she passed away, so I wish at least I'd had the sense to take a picture of some of them. She did beautiful quilts, and that's what she did while he was there. And she had never sewn a stitch in her life. She said till she went out there and she was determined she was going to make this pretty blanket. And she learned, and she showed me some of her first ones. They were not as perfected as the last ones, but that's what she did. She wanted to do that, and that's how she used her time. And after that, for many years, she really got into sewing these things. Now I'm not, I have made them, and but I'm not a quote quilter like some other people. I'd rather make clothes for people. I like making tablecloths, I like making curtains, and I like making coordinating things for your kitchen with fabric, and I really like fabric. And so these are just some of the things that she did. And then another lady that I knew, just really I knew them personally, described her husband was in some kind of business with, trying to think what it was. Was it oil or aerodynamics or something? But they ended up in a little desert place that also didn't have a town, but there was a town close by, and she said there was absolutely nothing there to be thrilled about. And so what she did was, it was in the olden days when you had to throw your dishwater out, your bath water out, and she said she threw the water out around the perimeter of the house and turned it all green, and planted things so that it would all be green, created a little oasis for herself. I just wonder sometimes if you might like to someday write a story and imagine yourself in a place where things are not as were not provided for you as much, and what you would do, how you would create a home, how would you spend your time if you had to go for some months away, how would you do that? Now it's really lovely if you can get married and have a nice house right away, and I highly recommend it. I would not recommend you start out with something so primitive that it's discouraging, especially some people don't respond very well to that. But if you did have a situation where you couldn't rely too much on the convenience of the commercial world, what would you do to create a home for yourself? And I've also read pioneer stories about women who came out west and started their own homes, and how they created the inside of their house. And one thing that I'm so thankful for these days is that there is more interest in home interiors and making it nice to look at inside, not just a place to sit or come or sleep when there's nowhere else to go, but just some place to really dwell. And so I'm very thankful for that. And this is a place, housekeeping is important because this is a place where you'll work, you'll develop spiritually, you'll provide nutrition and comfort and health for yourself and for your family. And so that's why it's so important to learn something about it. And it's also a place for mental stimulation and to develop yourself in many, many ways. Now I'd like to move on to talking about the different aspects of what you can do in a house. I realize a lot of you have families and that your time will be taken up with their needs, and some of you don't, but some of you are alone, but there's still a lot you can do. Now, in this issue of Homemakers Radio, I'd like to portray the home as places, different places. And I learned that a lot from when I was a child. My brothers and sister and I used to tramp out in the grass in the summer and create places. We'd create a store, we'd create a room, or we'd make a path to town, and we just created all this adventure just in the kind of the primitive forested area that we lived in. And we grew up in the wilderness, but we played with what we had, and it was so creative. It wasn't just about playing house. We played everything. We played going to town. We played building a business. We played exploring, and we played creating waterworks and electricity, and we just played everything that we could think of. We played going on trips, and so I was just thinking how valuable that is, to use the ideas that you might have had as a child in your home. And I remember once I did a little magazine, and it was for my children, but it was just to help them get started in the day. And we were homeschooling, and so we had to be creative with some things. And I homeschooled before there was boxed curriculum. I had to find things that I wanted them to know about. And I created a little magazine that was just folded up kind of like this, just paper folded in half. And it said in this, it was called Notes from Home, and it said in this issue, and these were the subjects inside of this little handwritten magazine. In those days, we didn't have copiers, so I copied it several times by hand so that each one could have one when they woke up. And this was called In This Issue, and here were the subjects: in the garden, in the library, what's going on in each. When I came to the library, I wrote, the book of the day in the library is, if you would like to check this out. And of course, all we had was a little shelf with some books in it. The music room, that was where some of the music was, and the church songbooks were. And in the music room, the song of the day, if you would like to look this up and find out about the words and what they mean. And then the tea room and the dining room. And then there was the ladies' classroom and the men's classroom. And I told all the things that could be done in the home in those things. And then we had events. And the events were the invention show, the fashion show, food preparation. There was the floral art contest, and then at the desk, and that was writing, ideas for writing and stories and poems to write. And then there was the open house, and I had the times and the date for all these things. And I thought, there's no reason why you couldn't still do something like that, and think of your house as a place of places, just like the Bible is a book of books. That's what Bible means. And I remember when I first saw a book called the Cake Bible, I thought, what? How dare they call that a Bible? But Bible just means book of books. And so the Bible's full of different subjects and different books. Well, your house is full of different rooms and what you could use for them. And I had one of my grandchildren came one time, stayed a while, and she made the cutest little signs from the scrapbook papers and the paraphernalia that we had, and named every room. And there was the garden room, and then there was the rose room, and there was the mountain view room, and she had all these cute signs, and she labeled all these spaces and rooms. And of course, then there's the outdoor rooms that you have. You have your porches and your gardens, and there's just so much potential for the home that people don't use, especially if you're on the go and you're just in and out all the time, and home is just a quick stopover. Some people just might as well be living in their car because they're rarely in their house. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more about this too. And so I have one more subject that I want to talk about, and that is, while we're speaking of women who had to move to remote places and how they made their house a home, what if you do end up in a place where even the church is small and you don't have anything in common maybe with people, or maybe there are no women your age or women at home? What would you do, and how would you survive without having those convenient things? I know a lot of people they grew up in churches. The churches are big and they've been part of their life all their lives. But what if you got sent to a very small area? What would you do? And I would suggest that the first thing you would do is turn to your home. If you cannot get a response from church members or from people that around you in the area, and you don't seem to be making much headway, not to put all your energy into that, but put your energy into developing yourself, getting dressed up, and making your home a home, because eventually that's going to be like a magnet to the kind of people who want to know more about it or who appreciate it. So I'd say focus on your home, turn a little inward, and be like have a comfort zone there. Go back to your comfort zone. I really believe in that comfort zone. And I know that there are people that don't approve of that, but your home is going to be what pays you back eventually, not the commercial world, not the social world, what really feeds you back is what you put into your home and your family. So there are special challenges for people that do find themselves isolated, and I suppose in this day and time that is a special challenge, but I would encourage you to find better ways to do things and find ways to make a list of things that you would like to improve in your life and find ways to do it. Find the things that you need to take. I'd like to talk about one more problem before I quit, and it's probably one of our favorites when we get down to dealing with people. And you know, I never heard the word negative till the late 1960s, probably around 1969. I heard this word negative, and I don't know what we used to call people before. We used to call them negative, or I don't know what we used to call reports before we called them a negative report. I suppose we called it a gloomy report. Now, I often wonder, first of all, how you can prevent these gloomy types, or these types that like to contradict you, talk back to you, and always have look at life on the downside, which can really draw you down if you're not careful, if you're not strong. And I think it's important to protect children from that sort of thing too. I know over the years I've seen kids who started hanging around with really gloomy children, and then it rubbed off on them, and you can't allow that. But negative people can only feed off of positive people. They really can't get anything out of people just like them. So you have to be careful not to run yourself down. You can't say, I can't seem to keep up with the housework. They're going to grab a hold of that, and they'll use that against you. They will say, she can't keep up with the housework. They just took your own words and used it against you. So you have to be careful around that if you're noticing that there are negative people that are criticizing you. The other thing is, don't go around saying, I forgot something, or I'm forgetful. They love to analyze you. There's all these amateur psychologists going around analyzing people, and they love to tell you that you're forgetful. And if you remember that old movie Gaslight, one of the things that the husband did to his new wife is try to convince her that she was losing her mind by telling her how many times she forgot something, and he would plant things around or take things away so that she it would look like she was losing her mind because she couldn't remember where she put it, but he would take it and put it somewhere else. You have to be really careful not to say, I forgot. You have to be really careful not to say, I'm very forgetful, because especially when you have children around, they're going to look at their mother as somewhat inferior, or they're going to worry. And you know, I told you, children should be have a carefree, happy childhood, free from worry and heavy responsibility, unnecessary worry. So don't worry your children by letting them think that you are inadequate. And if you will be careful and word things a different way, instead of saying, I forgot, say, there are so many things to do around here. I really need to write it all down so I won't forget. And rephrase things. And don't say, I'm a terrible such and such. Just say, this is quite a challenge. I'm going to learn more about it so I can be good at it. And teach your children to think that way too. When they're learning something, they're likely to get a little frustrated if they're not encouraged. But negative people, I often wondered why they can't congregate with people who have the same hopeless outlook. Why don't they go to a city? Why don't we have a special city for them? Why don't we have a special island for them where they can languish together in their own gloomy outlook and no joy, and nurture their hatred for life, and avoid people who would interfere with their gloom? You ever get the idea that some of these people are actually disappointed when you tell them things are going to turn out right? Be complaining about something, and you'll say, well, that's not true. It's actually changing. That is not going to be that way anymore. They're actually disappointed because they're feeding themselves this stuff. But you know, it's like being in the church, where we're told in the New Testament we are in the world but not of the world. And the reason is so that we can mingle with people and spread our salt and light. Well, that's why these gloomy people can't be banished to their own island. They have to be around us number one, they suck their energy out of us so they can have something to complain about. They'll meet a cheerful person and they're more likely to want to be around them, and so they have something to object to and argue with than to be around another gloomy person like themselves. They never hang around with their own kind, do they? And so, but we have a chance to be a light and influence these people with a cheerful outlook. And with people who are living that way in a dark world of gloom and doom, and some of them say they have to be that way so they won't be disappointed, because if they look forward to anything and then they're disappointed, it would be awful. So they just say, in the first place, it's not going to work. That way they're not disappointed. But we have to be very careful not to turn the light on too quickly around these people. They have to be treated gently because they get so offended by too much cheerfulness. So you have to be cautious with how you talk to them. They will talk back quite negatively. People have a gloomy outlook on life, are very negative. They also don't have very many original thoughts and original conversation or interesting conversation. They just really don't. They wait till someone else says something. They'll ask you what you're doing, and you'll say, well, I'm a homemaker now, or I'm home most of the time. I'm really enjoying it, taking some classes online, and I'm also remodeling my house, repainting. And they'll think of something to say that's negative, and it's usually, well, we can't all do that. Well, I can't do that. And so you have to be really careful what you say. If you turn on the light too quickly, it offends them, it hurts them, it hurts their eyes. If you're in a dark room and someone flips on the overhead light, it just makes you close everything off because it hurts. So you have to be really careful about people who are gloomy, and you have to bring them along slowly. So then you have the people that start out nice. They seem very nice. They like you. They act like they're amiable, they're friends with you, but after they get to know you, then they start to get their claws in, they start to go for your throat, they find little faults with you. And it's a technique of getting information and then using it for attack, turning it around for attack. And so it's very important that we get in the habit of building people up. And even if all you say is, I think it's possible that things might improve. I think it's possible that we might do it. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever heard someone say that things have always been bad and they always will be bad and nothing's ever going to get better. How would you like to be in an army where the general told you that no matter who wins the war, we're all going to be worse off and things are all going to be bad for everybody on both sides? How would you like to stay in an army like that where the general didn't even think that success was possible? Well, that's not very nice. That's not very good. And if you'll read the Apostle Paul and everything that he wrote, and Christ, everything that he said, you will not find that attitude anywhere. In fact, the Apostle Paul says to move on to perfection, to move on. So even in the home, you have got to guard your mind from these pessimistic thoughts. And one of the best ways is to avoid the media. Now, you might want to listen sometimes for some amusement, but generally, the quote mainstream media is very biased and never gives you any hope, and they are full of gloom and doom. And the only time they praise something is when it's something that's bad for you but good for them. And so we're fighting a lot of evil things, and we need to keep our minds clear as we can for our home, because there's evil there too. There's dirt, and there's chaos, and there's things that are out of order, and we need to fight that and use our energy for that. And also to always leave people thinking better, and always building people up and helping them. And I remember listening to somebody and I thought, wow, this guy is dynamic. And if anyone complained about anything, he would say, okay, what needs to be done? How can we fix it? And who knows how to do it? Okay, you do that and you do that, and we'll get that fixed next. And he owned a company, and that's how he got things done, is he didn't dwell on blame. Gets you nowhere. Punishment does not produce anything, but discipline does, because that's discipling. That's from the word disciple. It means to follow. And so if you're self-disciplined, you're going to follow some kind of a list or schedule in your home, so that you can produce more and get more done and be happier the next day. Another thing that I would suggest you do, I still have about 15 more minutes here, I would suggest you do is plan for a day off. And you're going to have to list everything that will need to be fixed or done ahead, so that you can have a day off. And I realize people aren't traveling so much in these last months of the year, are not traveling as much. So of course you're not spending as much money on travel or gas or all those expenses, and so maybe you could do a little bit extra for your day off at home and get yourself some kind of comfort, whether it's a new bath towel, whether it's some kind of, something for the home that makes it feel high-end hotel-ish, or clothing or something like that, and plan for yourself to have a day off. And on that day off, plan to do it the way you would do it if you were taking a vacation somewhere else. You would go see something. You would maybe buy something. You would maybe take pictures of something. So plan out a day off for yourself, even though you're going to be at home. And if you have a little backyard, there's a lot you can do back there. And I know some of you are going into summer now in the southern hemisphere, which somehow, the sun and the change in the colors and just the cheerfulness of it makes it easier when you're under any kind of stress. Summer weather, good weather, sunshine always makes it easier. But then some of us are going into winter, and this is where we will need to have some real stable thinking, and because it's easy enough when the weather is wonderful and it makes people happy. But it's not so easy when the weather is not wonderful and the skies are cloudy and it's dark inside, and there's no difference between 4 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It just always looks the same and it's dull. Well, that's when you have to kind of ignore it. Just ignore it and don't depend on the weather to help your mood. What you have to do is make your list and just go by your list and go by your plans, and keep your exercise classes, keep your art classes, and keep your notebook, and make a life for yourself, and teach your children to do the same. Now, I don't have anything to read to you from homeschooling today, but I will say that you don't need to use books and depend on books for homeschooling. Sometimes that doesn't create a whole person and develop all sides of them. What we would use the books for is for extra interest. We would have some homeschool books there, our history book and a reader, just for extra interest. But those are just helpers. And then the mother, she just guides them into what they mean, and we have a discussion about it. But we don't always, use them as tests to pass and things like that. You will have your own way. You will have your own method. You will do what you prefer to do. Unfortunately, many people who went to public school tend to start their homeschool that way, and it is miserable, and no one's happy. Whereas other people, they figure out right away, let's get out the teacups, let's sit around the table, and mother will read to you, and then we'll discuss it, or I'll ask you questions. And if they have special books, let's sit around together and enjoy it. And also sit in front of a window, look outside. I've heard people say that they would not want their children to study anywhere but in a room with walls all around and no windows, because the windows would distract them. But it's very important to look away from your work and focus out when you're doing close-up work. And you can study more about that later, but we were taught that way back in the olden days. You did need to sit by a window. You did need to have a place to look out or to look away. That was really important for your eyesight. So ladies, I think that I have probably done everything on my list. Oh, here's one thing, is called That's Her Ministry. So your ministry, if you find housekeeping hard, if you find the whole thing rather daunting, you're not really getting anywhere, you will look at it as a personal ministry. And what a ministry is, when you minister to someone, you serve them. So it's a service. And but it's not just a service, it is a teaching too. It's kind of like a common, because you could like go into service and learn how to work at a hotel and have a cart and serve things on a cart. But it isn't the same thing. In the home, it's not just serving something, it's not just preparing something, but it's also ministering to their hearts. And so we want to make the home lovely so that it is a place where people have been happy and where they'd love to return. And that makes it even more important that when you do your work, if you're getting frustrated, this is what we used to do in homeschool. If they got frustrated and it was hard, we just put it away for a while and went and did something else. Well, it's the same thing with homemaking. If you start to get frustrated with it, go on to something else, leave it. Sometimes you can make a little more progress the next time you tackle that job, but it's no point getting upset and screaming at everybody and making everybody else fall in line and making the home miserable. So best of all is to make your home a pleasant place, and it all starts with you. Sadly, there is no other one to blame. So I know that there are some people that make home living difficult. There can be members of the family that make it difficult, and that is an exception. That is something that happens that we all have to deal with. And I would like to, that's why I put these negative people in here, is how to work around negative people. And first of all, don't negative yourself, don't negative your home, don't say negative things about yourself, because that gives them material. And so you don't have to be, I know a lot of people think that it's dishonest if you don't admit that you have a problem in a certain area, but there are some people that cannot be trusted with your life, with the things on your mind. You have to be very careful what you do with that, because you could be giving people ideas that they'll run wild with, like Emma said to Harriet. You take an idea, Harriet, and you run wild with it. So ladies, I hope that this has been pleasant for you, and that you got a lot done, that you got dressed, and that you have some ideas for what you want for your home. I would say do your basics, make sure your kitchen is clean, get the clutter picked up in the living area, make sure your front porch is clean, get your bathroom sanitary, and get your laundry caught up with. As the best you can, do the rest of the room. Sometimes you can divide it up into days of the week so that you're not doing the same thing every day. And so I realize everybody has their own way of doing things. I don't expect them to do it the way that I do it. I've had to learn a lot of things, because I have come up from when we gathered water in a bucket from the lake and we heated it on top of the wood stove and the wood burning stove, and then we washed our dishes in it, and then we had the rinse water, and we would take the dirty water and throw it outside on the lawn or garden in the front, and then we would save the rinse water to wash something else in. And then I came into running water, which we used by a pump, and then later on, water on the faucet or tap or whatever you want to call it. And so my homemaking has come through a lot of adjustments, including living in a tent several months before we got into a house when I was a teenager, and I'm still with my parents. And so my homekeeping has had to adjust to many different things, and so I'm always finding myself learning something new, and perhaps you have never had to do that. That's nice, because now you can think about other things, and you've got that straight. You never had to do things too primitively, which is very time consuming. So anyway, this is a great time to be alive and a great time to thrive and make your life worth something by focusing on the home and developing yourself in the home. So ladies, I hope to see you again soon. Thank you for tuning in. I'm honored that you came. We'll talk to you later. Bye.